Hi everyone, my name is Sydney, and for my Psych 305 project, I decided to focus on sex education. So what I'm going to do is interview a few of my friends, just understand their experiences and what their thoughts on sex education are. What's your name?
My name is Caitlin.
What was your sex ed experience like?
My high school personally, we did not have sex ed for whatever reason, so none.
What have you learned since you've been in school?
Since I've been in school, well, I educate myself, so I've learned a lot about STD prevention, condoms, safe sex, good stuff like that.
And what are your thoughts on what sex ed curriculum should include?
I definitely think that the high school does need a curriculum. We have so many children nowadays, and not a lot of people know the right ways to go about sex regarding like condoms, STD prevention, stuff like that. So we definitely need some more of that stuff taught in school. Also things about women in itself. So like birth control, education on that, and just more education to guys as well, because they don't know anything about a woman most of the time. So we definitely need a lot of housekeeping in school.
All right.
So what's your name?
Traylon Brasso.
And what was your sex ed experience like, if you had one?
I never really had any before coming to UL. We didn't really have like a course or anything like that coming into school. So.
How much have you learned since high school?
I would say I've learned a lot through like res life programs and through being involved on campus. I've learned more about like safe sex, STI, and like STD facts, learning more information about them. And then also like learning about like consent and how to give and receive consent. So.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on what sex education curriculum should include?
Well, first I think like most schools should have one, because I feel like there's a lot of schools that don't even have like a sex ed program. And then also give more information, like I said, about like STIs, STDs, how to have safe sex, especially like for when they do come to college. Because that's when most people tend to branch out a little more. So give them more preparation and like before they get to college, so that when they get here they can practice those safe sex tips.
What's your name?
Brooke.
What was your sex ed experience like, if you had one?
I did have sex ed, and I thought it was a great experience, and I thought it was really important for kids to get that experience.
How much have you learned since then?
I've learned a lot, and I also feel like I've grown in the knowledge as well of sex ed.
What are your thoughts on what sex ed curriculum should include?
I think it should include not just everything that we did learn sex ed, but also like adoption and like how to deal with that, like adoption care and things like that.
So I wasn't able to video my last participant, but he did give me a list of his answers, and I'm gonna read them off of a Word document. So the first question, what was your sex ed experience like, if you had one? He said he did have one. It was very informative and gave good tips on how to have safe sex. Second question, how much have you learned since then? He has learned a lot more since he received that education. And the last question, what are your thoughts on what sex education curriculum should include? First and foremost, he said safety and how to have safe sex, kind of like how they taught him. And then secondly, he said anatomy and going into detail about that. So now that we're at the end of the project, I wanted to interview myself and give myself the last question I've been giving to my participants, which is about sex ed curriculums and what they should include. And I'm going to answer based on what I've learned this semester. So the two things that are important to me about sex education are the content discussed and how that content is delivered. So starting with the content discussed, first should be consent, because I feel like it's a very important topic that is left out majority of the time, followed by anatomy and going into details about what feels good, what doesn't feel good, etc. And lastly, sexual health and well-being, because this is a very important topic as well. I did not have a proper sex education in middle school or high school, so these are three things that I wish I would have learned about, and more should be learned about as well. These are just my top three that came to mind. And of course, the information given in sex ed should be accurate and not biased either way by any party or anything like that. Some people turn to the internet because they didn't have sex ed or they don't understand, and that's how people are misled most of the time. So it's important that the information given during sex education be accurate. So moving on to how content is delivered, it should be delivered actively, not passively, because if you're just sitting there reading something, not really engaging in any way, there's no way to retain the information. It's kind of like learning academically. You have to be active with your learning and not passive to retain the information and understand it better and apply it. So that's sex education, really. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch my project, and I hope you have a great day.